to the cloud.
Okay, there we go. I didn't see the recording sign. All right, I'll get started. Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for turning out again. In view of the number of people who have signed up to speak this evening, I'm going to abbreviate my opening comments. There are, though, a couple of points that I do want to emphasize. If this is your first time attending one of these meetings, I would urge you to view the earlier meeting videos, which can be found on the city's YouTube page. There you'll see some additional framing comments. Please understand that the committee is still in a listening mode. No conclusions have been drawn at this point, and none will be until we conclude these listening sessions. We are not looking at this as a one and done event. Reinventing is not an event as much as it is a process. So we are not therefore approaching this as an exercise that concludes once the report is submitted to New York State. In some form, there will be ongoing and organized dialogue, including the criminal justice professionals, the mental health, substance abuse communities, and the community at large. This is critical if we are to build enduring trust and a responsiveness to the needs of our community. This PRRC is but one step in a process that started well before the summer and will continue well after April 1st. The purpose of these meetings is to receive input from the community, but it is not the only or maybe not even the best way to submit information to the committee. We strongly encourage written comments, which will be shared with all committee members, will become part of the record and will be posted on the website. So whether you speak or not, we'd still love to have your written comments. At this time, I would like to introduce our Police Chief, Brian Owens, to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Owens. I'd like to thank you for being a part of this meeting tonight. Some of you may know me and Deputy Chief Dan DeWolf personally or professionally. We have worked closely with people throughout the neighborhoods of Troy for many years, and that has continued in our current roles. The Troy Police Department is a full-service New York State accredited law enforcement agency. Some of you have likely interacted with the men and women of our department, whether in the ordinary course of your life, as a result of a call for service, or during a serious incident. We are fortunate to have caring members who are willing and dedicated to serving others. We demonstrate this through our actions and attitudes every hour of every day during thousands of interactions each year. There are countless instances of our members offering life-changing and even life-saving assistance to people we encounter. We are grateful for the strong support of our community members and strive to not only keep people safe from crime, but to also help people in ways big and small. We're also fortunate to have our partners on the committee and the people and resources that your organizations offer to the people of Troy and beyond. Through this series of meetings and others, the Troy Police Department has had ongoing conversations and collaborated with our community, including the neighborhoods and organizations represented by the speakers and committee members for many years, in some cases decades. We have evolved over time to better serve the people of our city, and we welcome this ongoing dialogue to find ways to improve as a police department. We also look forward to continuing to listen to members of our community on ways to address issues of crime, disorder, and injustice. Our goal is to make Troy a healthy, better, and safer city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Again, I'd like to thank everybody in advance for their participation and critical thinking. And again, encourage written comments. Even if you've spoken tonight or at a previous meeting, your written comments are useful to us and they'd be very much appreciated. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the facilitator for this evening, Tamara Gottschall. Tamara runs her own company, Creative Cadence. And over the years, she's done a good deal of work with Fred Miller of Khalil Jamison, who is based in Troy. I think many of you know of Fred and Khalil. So at this time, I will turn it over to Tamara.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to be here with you this evening. John, we could take a look at the agenda. We just had our opening comments from Mayor Madden and Police Chief Owens. I'm going to cover some process guidelines. And then we will go into the public comment portion of the evening. We have a number of folks who have registered this evening. I think we have about 23 who have signed up to share feedback with the committee. Then we will go into a working session with the committee where the committee will reflect on the comments that have been received from the public. At tonight's meeting, there will not be a Q&A back and forth between the public commenters and the committee. We will have public comment and then go into the working session with the committee. But if something comes up and you have other ideas, or you're listening to the discussion after the public comment portion, we would encourage you to send in written comments through email or through postal mail. So from a process perspective this evening, committee members, you know the drill. If you could please mute when you're not speaking. You can use the *6 if you're on a phone to mute and unmute. Those who have signed up this evening to speak, you're going to have 3 minutes to address the committee. Speakers will be unmuted one at a time. And when you have about 10 seconds left, I will let you know that your time is almost up. This is the last public forum. This is the 3rd public forum that we've had. So if there are other comments that you have, please submit those through email or writing by March 1st. So the affinity group meetings and the public forums are all being live streamed via YouTube on the Troy channel. They are recorded and then posted on the troyny.gov police RRC website, and the full schedule is there. So if we go to the next slide, for those of you that may not be familiar, on the website, there are a series of 4 questions that the committee is seeking input on. And again, you have until March 1st to submit comments. So at this point, we will go into the public comment portion, and I'll ask John Salka, the Director of Communications. He'll bring on our first speaker.
Okay, our first speaker is going to be Stephen Figueroa, and then next will be Dan Pfeiffer. Go ahead, Steve.
Hello, good evening. You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. My name is Stephen Figueroa, community advocate, youth advocate, community organizer, director of Team Hero. I just have 2 simple questions. My first question is, at the beginning, there was a lot of concerns and questions in regards to the committee being more diverse. And as of now, we've probably went through a couple of these meetings so far, and yet haven't seen, or even the committee hasn't even touched in regards to possibly diversifying the people that sits on the committee. So that was kind of one of my concerns. I don't know if it was going to be added at the end or if it was going to be talked about, but there has been plenty of concerns in regards to, out of the 15, about only 4, it's from a diverse background, which was a concern to many. My second question, recently, probably has not been publicized, but I saw a video picture. My question to the police department is stepping on a human being's back, part of protocol when it comes to a individual being detained. The only reason why I asked that is because I saw videos out, I saw pictures out. It was a recent incident that happened in the Lansingburg area, and it was really a question. I know we're going through, the process of, going over policies and how officers are handling situations when it comes to being detained. And we see that it's been an issue through Troy, throughout the country. And it was a recent incident. And my question is stepping on a human being's back part of the process of someone being detained? That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, next up is Dan Pfeiffer. Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, on April 1st, you will submit a report to the state with recommendations. What will happen with those recommendations? How confident are you that they will be enacted by Troy PD? We need police accountability, and we must acknowledge existing oversight mechanisms that have failed. The status quo is police impunity. If the proposals from this task force are non-binding, what chance do they stand against a police union contract that has been sharpened over many decades to maximize impunity? The police know that their power will go unchecked. They know that the mayor and the district attorney are reliably on their side. What oversight we have now is a fig leaf that enables bad behavior. Here's a quote from Troy police officer Dominique Comitali, who got into a fight at a Little League game speaking to a North Greenbush officer. "You should have went to Troy, man. It's a lot easier. You don't have to deal with this effing shit. You'd be slapping people around, telling them to F off." At the 2018 Sanctuary City public hearings, Troy PBA president Nick Laviano said that if it were to pass, quote, "I would gladly violate this resolution every day that I work." The reason the police chief feels confident to repeatedly deny the existence of structural racism in Troy PD is that he knows his denial carries no real consequences. What does hold people accountable? Bystanders with cameras. We need systemic change, but that is beyond the scope of this group. I would like to hear the task force discuss video surveillance. Body-worn cameras are a remedial measure, but I think it's important to get the details right. Here are some factors to consider. When are officers required to turn on their cameras? What penalty will officers suffer if they don't turn on their cameras when they're required to? Will officers be allowed to review footage before they write incident reports? Facial recognition technology, its use must be banned. Who has access to the videos and for how long? Body-worn cameras are still an experiment. We don't know what effect they will have when introduced in Troy. Can we condition their use on some measurable outcome? If that condition were not met, can we say the experiment failed and that we should stop using them? Finally, I want to draw attention to the Troy SafeCam program, where members of the public can share security camera evidence with police. In order to participate, the webpage says, "You agree not to release any video or picture images to media without consulting the Troy Police Department."
Dan, you have 10 seconds.
This is a bad policy that should be repealed, and it makes me skeptical that body-worn cameras will be treated any differently. Please get this one right. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Dan.
Next up, we have Ellie Irons, and after that is Deva Arthur. Go ahead, Ellie.
Hi, thank you to those gathered here today for being present and for the opportunity to speak. I've been following along with the task force meetings over the past month, and I agree with a lot of the concerns that were voiced by affiliate groups like the City Council Work Group and the Justice Center, who presented last week. I'm not going to rehash all of it, but I agree that supporting diversion programs, moving resources and funding to mental health and crisis intervention services, and setting up a powerful civilian review board composed with my daughter's help, composed of those most impacted by police violence are important steps. Amongst these many good and productive suggestions, one thing continues to stand out at me: the failure of those in power in Troy to address the specific local histories and events that demonstrate the presence of systemic racism and related lack of transparency and impunity in the Troy Police Department. I know you're still working on your report and have said that our comments and suggestions in these forums will be taken into account, but it's hard to feel confident that this report will do much when some of those here tonight, perhaps the person with the most power to shift the course, Chief Owens, continues to give only half-hearted and qualified acknowledgements of the presence of systemic racism in the Troy Police Department. And Mayor Madden, you continue to tolerate this position. How can this be? We live in a society structured around racial inequity. White supremacy animates every institution, from government, education, to housing, to, of course, policing. Everyone is implicated. Acknowledging that with certainty is essential to next steps. How can we expect to change at the Troy PD if there isn't openness, transparency, and specificity about past failures, if we don't invoke Edson Thevenon's murder alongside the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, or address the case of Officer Chris Johnson, who has filed a lawsuit based on his experience of pervasive racial discrimination in the department, after, it should be pointed out, exhausting other means of addressing these issues internally. These are just some of the most recent and most notorious of a long and growing list. Of course, we cannot and should not expect reforming or even abolishing the police to right the ills of a white supremacist, patriarchal, colonial, and extractive society. But it's essential to do everything possible right now, like immediately, to reduce and mitigate violence and harm occurring at the hands of police, while we work like hell on the rest of the issues that are driving injustice. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ellie.
Next up is Deva Arthur, followed by, I believe it is Shanna Goldman. Go ahead, Deva.
Hi there. Thank you for having this forum. This is my first time on it. I was unaware of the previous ones. I wish I'd known. I'm a longtime resident of Troy and activist. I've been a social worker here and a longtime person who's worked for in the police reform for decades, early days of trying to set up a civilian review board. I've since thrown up my hands about that because just really hasn't done much or doesn't have much bite or any power to it. So it really, I've seen it not be that effectual. I see that you're trying, that there's an attempt to start a new one. I'm not impressed with the people that you have in it. You know, what you need to be considering is having people of color who are leaders in the community, who are not necessarily, you know, in the mainstream, so to speak, but who are really working towards improving the situation in Troy. And some of those people may not be that, I'll just say they're controversial, but I think they need to be included and given a voice. And that's where, you know, you're going to get some buy-in from the community if you see some of those people on these committees. Also, transparency is appalling in Troy and really needs to be addressed. Until you are transparent with your investigations, with the actions that are taken in the police department, no one is going to believe that you're actually making a true effort towards reform. On a lesser note, you know, I've seen over the years attempts to get police on the street and in the community and interacting, and it's mildly work, but then it soon disappears and police are back in their cars, back in the buildings and not interacting so much. And you know, I think that police should be hanging out with some of the people in jail and getting to know them as people and not just people that they've arrested. And then maybe you'll get some more understanding of who they are. I've certainly been benefited from the police. I live in Lansingburg and I've had tough times, but you know, and they've helped me out many times. But there's also a lot of problems and conflicts between the police in Troy and the Black community especially.
Dava, you have 10 seconds.
Okay, so I thank you for giving us a chance to voice some of this and hopefully go forward with some real openness to hearing from people who may not say what the city wants to hear, but needs to be said. Thank you.
Thank you, Dava.
All right, next up is going to be Shanna Goldman. I apologize if I mispronounce some people's first or last names. I don't have the benefit of getting the phonetical pronunciation for some of these folks. So it may be Shana, it may be Shanna. I apologize. Unfortunately, it says that she's using an older version of Zoom, which does not allow her to speak. I cannot unmute her. If Shanna, if you're listening right now, if you can log off and update your Zoom very quickly, we can allow you to talk, but it's not allowing me to unmute you. Next, I'll go to Melissa Bromley. Go ahead.
Hi. Can you see me too, or is just
audio?
Okay. I've been trying to think all day about what to say, and I haven't reached any clarity. I am so inspired listening to Jerry Ford and Deborah Garrett address these topics from a place of love. And I know that the way that they are dealing with them is from a different perspective. But I also feel like because of who I am and my circumstances, I have the freedom to be a little bit more direct, and I'm just so disappointed. I mean, this whole process just seems like the city of Troy is trying to do the least possible to make any change. And, I want to believe that people want to make things better for the conditions of Black people, brown people, the people who most have to deal with police. And it's just really hard to feel that way watching this process unfold. The fact that just to talk in this, you had to register in 2 different ways. I mean, it's like, y'all don't want people to talk. And there are ways to make this process more open and transparent, and you're choosing not to do that. And, the intros from the police chief and the mayor, it just, we kind of know what y'all think. I feel like this is an opportunity to hear from the community what everybody else thinks. And just doesn't feel like there's an openness to that. It seems like there's a barrier. And yeah, I mean, the last week's conversation, it was like the complaint form seems like the one thing that could be changed, and that is just so minimal. I mean, why are we even talking about complaint forms? Why are there already complaint forms readily available in the police station? You know what I mean? Like the first time it was brought up months ago, it should have just happened right away. I don't know. I wish that I, had the capacity to like open minds and hearts. But I just, felt like at least I could show up and say something.
Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, next up is Sonia Hovsepian. I apologize, Sonia, if I butchered your last name. I really do. It appears that she has not logged into the call. Next up is Noreen Mckee. Go ahead, Noreen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. My name is Noreen Mckee. I am a resident of Troy and on the board of the Justice Center of Rensselaer County, which presented our police reform recommendations to you last week. I will not go into any of these reforms here tonight, but I wish to speak to 2 critical issues, which, if don't get confronted, will render this body and any proposed reforms to reimagine policing in our community meaningless. And those issues are racism in the police department and the all too powerful police union. Many of us in the Troy community know that racism exists in the PD. I heard stories, as have many of you, about police harassing and unjustly stopping and arresting people of color. I heard it from members of the Black and minority community. I've heard it from folks who have worked for the police department, and I've heard it from longtime elected officials who have lived in Troy all their lives. The chief and other leaders of the police department must acknowledge this before we can move forward with real, effective, and meaningful reform. We have an opportunity to make our police department a model of fair, equitable, and quality policing for the nation if we have the courage to face reality and stand up to opposing forces that simply want to maintain the status quo. As for the police union, it's too powerful and has stood in the way of executing solid policing measures like the implementation of body cameras. How long is it going to take? Chief Owens, you met with the NAACP how long ago about the use of body cameras? Has it been 3 years and they're still not in use? And why is there a union representative on the Police Objective Review Board? Even if a non-voting member, it doesn't make any sense to have a representative of the police on an independent citizens board set up to look into the actions of the police. It's intimidating and purely a conflict of interest. Our community will be safer and healthier when we have a police department in place that works for all of us, where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Thank you for your time and efforts.
Thank you, Noreen.
Next up is Shell Miller. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. My name is Chell Miller. I'm a Troy resident. I'm the communications director at the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and I serve on the board of directors for the Capital Region chapter of the New York Civil Liberties Union. I would like to echo the concerns raised by Troy constituents at previous public forums, namely the concern about the City of Troy's failure to include impacted communities in the development and appointments of this committee, and the need for reconciliation between people directly harmed by the police and the city at large. I agree with the concerns my fellow community members have raised. I would also like to raise some of my own concerns as a Troy resident and as an advocate for survivors of violence. While COVID-19 has made it impossible for us to convene in person, these public forums and listening sessions are not accessible to the community. Like Melissa Bromley shared earlier, having to register twice in order to provide input on this venue is unnecessary and redundant. Many people in our community have inconsistent access to electronics and internet. What kind of outreach is the committee doing to make sure their voices are heard? And third, this call is completely inaccessible to anyone who is hard of hearing. Does the city plan to make these available to people who are hard of hearing or use American Sign Language, for example? Next, the scope of this committee is incredibly limited to the detriment of Troy residents. The City of Troy needs to shift its focus upstream, investing in opportunities for our communities to thrive, like healthcare, housing, education, food security, and community interventions that reduce arrests and incarceration. Those will prevent violence and improve community safety in our city. The Troy Police Department accounts for nearly a third of the city's general fund. As others have shared, by eliminating the police department's 2021 budget increase, we can afford to invest in our community. The bottom line is that the City of Troy needs to invest in the people of Troy, not in policing and incarcerating residents who are already marginalized by systemic racism and other forms of oppression. Finally, we still do not have justice for the murder of Edson Thevenin in April 2016. Those who enabled the killing of Edson and those who have covered up his murder have not taken accountability for their actions. I ask the City of Troy and Troy PD, how do you expect us to trust you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chell.
Next up is Deanna Swenson. I'm not seeing Deanna on the call. Next up is Deborah Garrett. Go ahead, Deb.
I'm not sure if I'm still muted or not.
Nope, you're not muted. We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to get up here and share this with you all. When we spoke as a TCBO group a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about a key factor, which was trust. And I think that's where everything is kind of getting misconstrued for me right now. A part of the governor's address on his website, it says, "I urge everyone to begin these discussions immediately. Restoring the relationship between the community and the police is in everyone's best interest." Time is short. He has that written on his website that's attached to the actual reform workbook. And I feel like that's important to say because we already, you might as well say we're in March. We only have a few more days and February will be over. And it feels like we're just now getting started. And I don't think that that's fair. And that's why I wanted to make sure I mentioned trust. That's a big issue with police in any place that you go amongst Black and brown communities. How can someone trust someone if they don't implement certain things? Like, we had this information for a while now. Why haven't we been started this movement? So I just wanted to get up here and make sure I share that. It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. And I want to also mention that I have 3 Black sons, and at the end of the day, they're going to grow up to be three Black men. I want to get this stuff dealt with now while they're still little, while I can still mold them to protect them and things that is out of my parameters. So the fact that we're just now getting these things started, it really sucks. And it kind of is very disheartening, especially because I have relationships with different people that's a part of this work group. And it really feels like we're pushed to the last of the thought, like you didn't really think us through. So I think that's important to understand. I also think that we need a diverse officer. The city of Troy needs a diversity officer, someone who can see beyond the scopes of, the old boys club or the blue, what do you call, like the blue codes and all those other little logistics that happen that people don't want to speak about. Black and brown lives matter. And I want to leave with this. What just isn't always justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Next up is Billy Carter. Go ahead, Billy. Billy, you're still muted. Are you there, Billy? You're still muted if you're trying to talk. Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to Billy. Maybe he stepped away from his computer. Next up is Angela Baylor. Angela, go ahead.
Am I unmuted? Thank you.
Yes, you are.
Hi, I live in the Hillside neighborhood of Troy. I'm going to cut to the chase since we've been allotted precious minutes. I feel that Cuomo's EO 203 process is deeply flawed. Even more so, as Deborah just mentioned, Troy dropped the ball in almost 8 months of characteristic silence, leaving very little time to work on the matter in and or with the public. Public comment has been tiny, only because the city has done very little to reach out and encourage it. You ask how to produce trust and transparency. Some clues are right here within your very own collaborative. Chief Owens is transparent in his participation in the problem of police violence and racism. He denies the existence of systemic racism in the TPD, believes it is only an issue if it is explicitly written into the policies and procedures of the department. That is the thing about systemic racism. In order to address it, it must be explicitly written out of any policies and procedures. It must be addressed directly and over time in any institution within a culture so shaped and determined by white supremacy and racism. It must be worked on aggressively by you and all of us who have willingly and or unwittingly participated in it. You hold power in such an institution that has been one of the locking keys on holding systemic racism in its place. In addition, Officer Christopher Johnson just sued the department and city over systemic racism. How do you respond to that? In 2016, Edson Thevenin was returning home from a party, was pulled over by a police officer, Officer French, who would go on to fatally shoot Thevenin, and then, as we know by the department's own internal reports and the assessment of the Attorney General's office, lied about what happened that night. His family and community are still waiting on justice in this case, a case that the city is opaque about, will not speak about, hides behind a lawsuit. In 2018, Carmela Montello was returning from a good time at a casino. While drunk driving, vehicularly harassed a stranger for 30 miles on various highways, was finally stopped by police, refused a breath test. Survived this interaction, made it home, kept her job, served no time. She wants to claim we have one Troy, but this Troy is shaped by racism and xenophobia. Until this is faced and confronted, there will be no trust, no sense of transparency. As a white community member, I could live and not see the situation. Within the past 2 years, the police have come and harassed my Black neighbor multiple times who grew up in this area. One night, someone called the police because of loud music. It was a summer night. It wasn't that late. The police showed up in force. He had to yell out his window, warning them not to bust in the door because his son and dog were in there. He didn't want to see them killed. They finally dragged him out over loud music, took him downtown, ran his license. He had one infraction, opening a fire hydrant. The police were disappointed. They let him go and gave him a ticket. Late at night, we watched and filmed out our window out of fear for his life. This is inexcusable. I want to see money redirected towards genuine social services for Troy. I want to see the power of the PBA torn down. I want transparency on the insurance system in place for the TPD. I want transparency on the murder of Edson Thevenin. I want more details on the situation in Lansingburg that Stephen Figueroa just asked about. Please tell us more about that. I want to see my neighbors and our whole city safe from city-sponsored harassment, violence, and worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Next up is Daquetta Jones. Daquetta, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Daquetta Jones, and I have been a resident of Troy, New York in District 6 for 13 years. I have had an opportunity to listen to every single PRRC meeting held, including the affinity groups. First, as it relates to the systemic racism question posed, here are my thoughts. Maybe if white people were being murdered by police without just cause, subjected to profound and historic racism and biases, complete disregard of white people's screams demanding police accountability and systemic change at the same level of as Black folks, maybe police Chief Owens and Mayor Madden can say without hesitation that systemic racism is in the city of Troy and the Troy Police Department. Systemic racism exists at the federal, state, and local levels, including public and private institutions in this nation, period. It was designed intentionally to oppress Black and brown folks. Stating a simple yes to this question is not saying you created it. I call on you to be the catalyst for change by first collectively recognizing without hesitation that systemic racism exists in the city of Troy and Troy Police Department. I stand with the Troy Coalition of Black Leaders, the Troy for Black Lives, the Troy DSA, the Justice Center of Rensselaer County, and the Reimagine Troy Working Group demands, and call that you not only consider, but implement these demands. Be the catalyst for change, because performative actions is harmful and deadly to Black lives. As a Black woman, resident of the city of Troy, a servant, called a friend by some of you, I hope that my Black life matters. I hope that my Black son's life matter. I hope that my Black mother's life matter. My Black partner's life matter. The Black lives on this coalition matter. Edison's life matter. Demeek's life matter. Every single Black life matters. Be the catalyst for change. I call on the mayor to stop looking and/or waiting for buy-in from people that do not want change because they like it just the way it is. Hint, the police, the Troy Police Union. Accountability is well overdue. Accountability of city officials, elected officials, police unions must be deemed necessary by any means necessary because enough is enough. And I must add, this process is triggering and traumatizing. To demonstrate this city readiness to be the catalyst for change, start by settling the civil rights cases of the Edison Thevenin family and former police officer Christopher Johnson in their favor. Be the catalyst for change because performative actions are harmful and deadly to Black lives. James Baldwin once said, there are so many ways of being despicable and it quite makes one's head spin. But the way to be really despicable is to be contemptuous of other people's pain. And that's all that I had to add. I think you just said I had 10 seconds.
Yes.
Okay, is it up?
You have 10 more. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to also add that this process to sign up, although I found that it was straightforward to sign up, I do have to agree with Melissa. I did receive a confirmation that I had signed up to speak, but it did not include the links. So I had to reply to the email, but then I had also located that it was sent to me, but it was in my spam box. And I think that I am pretty certain that this is a direct reason for the low participation. So thank you so much for your time.
Just a note to everyone, the emails come directly from Zoom, so you have to make sure that your email account does not label emails from Zoom as spam. Next up is Francis Magai. I am not seeing him on the list. James Wilde is next, and James is also not on the list. Next up is Michaela Bedoin. I thought I saw Michaela on earlier. Maybe she dropped off.
Hey, John.
Next up is Jessica Ashley.
John, I see two Magais on the list, Jack Magai.
There are several Magais that registered for tonight's meeting. We'll get to them.
Okay, got it.
Just for a note for everybody listening, this is the order in which people signed up, is the order that everybody's speaking tonight. So next up is Jessica Ashley. Go ahead. Jessica, you are muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Born and raised in the city of Troy. And I've seen many ugly things, good, bad things. The worst thing that comes to my mind at this present time is Edson Thevenon's killing. As a mother, I cannot get it out of my mind. And if I, not the mother of Edson Thevenon, cannot find peace from the murder of this young man, father of two beautiful boys, a husband, for his last experience to be a policeman beating his back when he obviously was reaching out for help, for mercy. And that was never dealt with. I can't help but remember how it wasn't long afterwards, there was another shooting in the city of Troy. It might've been a year or two later in Freer Park. And in that shooting, 2 Rensselaer police officers lost their job because they shot and killed a rodent. And there was an outcry from City Hall. There was an outcry from council. How dare they shoot and kill an innocent rodent? Those men were terminated. A Black man was murdered in this city. It was not my birth child, but he could have been my son. Why can't you understand the depth of the pain that this thing is causing? You must address this thing. You'll never be able to make Edson's mother whole. You'll never be able to make his wife whole or his sons. But you will never, ever on earth justify the fact that Randall French murdered that man. You had the evidence from the Troy Police Department. You decided not to accept it, and you got You paid our tax dollars for another investigator who never investigated the scene while it was yet hot. With that said, racism is alive and well, and Randall French was racist. And anybody who supported him and his deadly deeds is an accessory to his crime.
Jessica, you have 10 seconds.
It is time for this city to be made whole. You start by an alliance, and that alliance takes place with the community and the police department. See ourselves working together towards a common goal, making the city, building up the city, and taking care of the city, taking care of one another. If you cannot do that, which starts with getting this case settled with
Thank you,
Edson
Jessica.
Bevan's family. Thank you.
I'm just going to loop back around to Shanna Goldman. I believe she has resolved her Zoom issue. So hold on one second. Let me pull up Shanna. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and so to answer your first question, it's Shanna. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who has spoken, especially Deb and Daquetta and Jessica and others who have to traumatize themselves, re-traumatize themselves just to try to explain that there's racism in this city. I listened on February, I think it was February 13th or 15th, when the police chief continued to insist that there was no systemic racism in the Troy Police Department, and heard folks on this committee say, well, maybe we should have a working definition of racism and systemic racism. And so I'm just in total shock, because in 2014 was maybe the last time I addressed the city of Troy in a public forum. It was because of the Kokopelli's incident, where police on camera were filmed coming into Kokopelli's after the incident had already been taken care of. The patrons there were calm. They incited a riot. Violence broke out and nothing happened. There were protests, there were forums, there was speak outs like this. Nothing happened. I do remember that the PBA was incredibly defensive. They harassed people who stood up and spoke out. That's all I recall happening as a result of that incident. So then fast forward 2016, Edson Thevenin was murdered. 2018, Demeke McDonald was shot, not far from where Edson Thevenin was murdered. 2019, reports came out from a police officer that there was a cover-up of Edson Thevenin's murder. And then June 2020, 11,000 people marched in the city of Troy in support of Black lives. And then following that, Governor Cuomo puts out this executive order for a plan to be submitted addressing police reform. And only on February 15th, 2021, do we start to think maybe we should at least inform ourselves about what systemic or structural or institutional racism is and means. I think that's unacceptable. It should be the starting point for anybody who chooses to serve a city as diverse as Troy, whether you're elected, whether you're hired. So I also want to share, I feel like it will be very, very important to fund programs that support mental health, that support folks dealing with domestic violence that are not funded through the police. I lived on 15th Street several years ago, and between Hoosick and Hutton, and I was sitting on my porch as a woman came out of her house across the street, clearly distraught. There was some kind of domestic dispute happening, and not sure whether I should go over or not. I didn't know her. The police showed up, and I decided I had to go over because—
Shanna, you have about 10 seconds.
I could see that the police were making it worse. So I was able to, not trained, I was able to de-escalate the situation, help advocate for her. There's no reason why police should have shown up to a domestic dispute like that. And I saw them only making the situation worse. All I had to do was sit down next to her to get her to sit down with me and calm down.
Shanna.
Next up is Jack Magai. Go ahead, Jack.
Hello. You
Oh.
can hear me. Great. Hi. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Well, I from hearing what everybody has said so far, I do think that this process deserves more time and further development. But I prepared something to read a little bit different. The events that have led us to have this meeting tonight were violent and extreme, but to the extent that I have intuitions about the difficult situation we face with the culture of policing, I think subtle changes would be a great place to start. I've always been struck by the bravado of police in Troy as expressed by their flaunting of the laws they act to enforce. If officers simply set an example for all of us by obeying all traffic laws when not responding to emergencies, I think that would begin to fill the divide. In particular, the habit of officers parking on the sidewalk in front of the high school conveys a message of police exceptionalism to impressionable young people. Body language is also important, but more difficult to describe and to fix. And in addition to taking more significant steps towards effective community policing, taking more significant steps towards effective community policing is in order. I picture residents signing up for dates to walk their neighborhood with their beat cop. I understand these issues are trivial on their face, or these solutions are trivial on their face, but I think they could be subtly effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Next up is Tashika Medina. Go ahead.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mhm.
So the first thing I want to touch on is the mayor just had really a hard time saying that systemic racism exists in Troy. So I'm going to answer that question for him. Yes, it does, sir. It has been proven on so many factors with Essen Thevenin, Tommy. I mean, the list can go on. You cannot serve a community if you don't include the community. The matter is that he's very silent. We understand that you're a businessman, but you also need to be a community man and understand that systemic racism in Troy, New York has been in existence since, and I'm an implant. I've been here for 15 years. I done got dragged out my house. My kids done got beat up, and I have 6 Black boys in the city of Troy. Officer Cowles Jones is a menace to the North Central community, and nothing gets done about it. The city done paid so much money for his mishaps. It's disgusting. Okay, so yes, it exists. The silence from our mayor is devastating. We don't care about downtown. Yeah, it looks all glitz and glam, but let's come over to North Central. We need a grocery store. Our babies need fresh fruits and vegetables. We like it just like y'all, okay? Let's talk about the fucking silence. Excuse my language. Let's talk about the silence with Barker Park, okay? You cannot say you care about the people of your town, but ignore that is a huge harm reduction problem in the city of Troy. And instead of you putting the programs that you guys get money, that you're doing this project, this PPRC in a haste, you guys are doing it in a haste. to get the funding. You already had the funding and the input to put in the communities like Barker Park and implement harm reduction, and you didn't. Be Equality for Troy and Troy for Black Lives did that. Y'all didn't, okay? When are you gonna sit down? The community will never trust you guys. You guys sit here and cover up murders and do palsy-wowsy. Like, let's talk about Carmela and Lovato being family members. You understand? Let's talk about that, and that she can actually commit crimes and keep her position. Let's talk about that.
Tashika, you have 10 seconds.
Thank you for that. But I just want to talk about, we cannot move on until you guys address certain issues, that you ignore the communities that need addressing, and you take care of downtown, and we're sick of it and we're tired of it. Include the community. We don't have no problem with you guys. We just want you guys to do what you guys.
Thank you, Tashika.
You guys obviously was not elected, you were selected.
Next up is Leonard Magai. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Leonard Mcgowan. Well, I don't have as many.
Leander, we're getting an
I don't
echo
have
in
as
the background.
piercing a thing to say as all the people who have come previously to me. I guess I draw from my own experience, and I guess I'll begin. I'm worried about the fear of the community that the police have. I go to Troy High School, and a classmate of mine is a Troy police cadet. He told me earlier this year that he was more concerned about getting shot in the head than COVID. I'm afraid that this fear would lead to a tendency to use excessive force. And I see my fears borne out in all the people who have previously talked about Edson Thevenin and others. And I think that this leads to police having too much pride and a lack of humility. I don't think they treat people the way they should. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Leander.
Last up, we have Amy Holleran. Then I'm going to go, while Amy's speaking, I'll go through the list and see if anyone has rejoined, and we will try Billy Carter one more time to see if his microphone issue has been resolved. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I'm really grateful for the comments that I've heard tonight, in particular, the comments of the people of color who found their way to this forum. There are far too few people of color in this consideration of the future of police in Troy, but that reflects the not me stance of my city in trying to face its racism or not face it. The events of last year that triggered a global recognition of racism in America sparked Governor Cuomo to call on New York communities to re-envision police. What we have here is not a reimagination at all. We're using the same old box of crayons and saying that it doesn't exist. What racism can't be seen because there's so much whiteness present here. I'm angry that this effort is tap dancing around the deep problems of racism in our city's police force. I am hopeful that this work in progress will get radical. That's because hope is my dominant compass. I dream better than I see, and I am asking this whole task force and my mayor to dream bigger about protecting the Black and brown citizens who should enjoy the same safeties that I and my two white boys do as we walk the streets. We have a lot of work to do here, and acknowledging it is the first step. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, it doesn't look like any of the individuals who had signed up have joined the meeting that were on the list. I am going to try Billy Carter one more time. Billy, hopefully you're at your computer. Go ahead and give this a shot.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
All right. Well, we're here tonight because Black Lives Matter, because over the summer, unrest had reached such a point in America, and here in Rensselaer County, here in the city of Troy, with the treatment of Black folk, that spilled over, and so things must change, things must be done. It's the only reason why we're here, and we're not here because our city officials decided that it was time for a change. What's it going to take to implement these changes sincerely, not just talking and trying to smooth things over until unrest, until you get the funding that you need, but what's it going to take to make lasting changes? Yes, there's systemic racism. I'm grateful for all the speakers that came before us, but Your Honor, the mayor, they came to your house. Black Lives Matter movement, others marched up to your house. You didn't answer the door. What would happen if you opened up that door? What's it going to take? It's going to take for them to drag you out on the street, beat the crap out of you. What is it going to take? And then you probably still wouldn't wake up. You probably say that it was the folks' fault that dragged you out. And it may well be that that's what it's going to take. I pray that folk never give up. It's a Black Lives Matter movement. But I pray that nothing happens to anyone. I am a man of peace, and I pray that nothing happens to you or to any other Black person that won't be murdered or beat up. On the other side, I've been working with the chief and with the district attorney to make changes to help make an impact where it counts, right on the ground level, on the street level. So I'm grateful to Chief Owens, the district attorney, Mary Pat, who I think if we give them a chance, and if they can come, especially with Chief, I love you. And if you can come out from behind the mayor, and I know he's your boss right now, but I pray that you could come out from behind him and make a difference. I know you, you're a good man, but you have a tough job. You have a very tough job. And Mary Pat, we do stand behind you. You also have a chance to make a huge difference. And I pray that you stay out and off political coattails and make the difference that you can. My hope, I was out during the Black Lives Matter march rally in Troy with 11,000 people. Myself and other ministers were out there. The chief and his officers were out there. They donated pizza.
Billy, you have 10 seconds.
Yeah, they donated pizza and water and things like that. Mary Pat has been instrumental in helping us with kids, with diversions. So there is hope. So let's keep hope alive, as Jesse Jackson would say. But BS is BS. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. Okay. So we'd like to thank all who came this evening to share public comments. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, this is the last public forum, but the committee is still receiving comments until March 1st, so they can be emailed or sent through postal mail. So at this point, we will move out of the public comment period, and we will move into working time for the committee. And we will do the same thing that we did at our last public forum. It's an opportunity to reflect on everything that we've heard from our many speakers here this evening. Are there any points of clarification that anyone on the committee would like to make before we move into reflections? Okay, so we can use the same approach that we did last time and just either use the raise hand or you can wave. Renee?
I'm trying to find which speaker it was. The individual that spoke about the fear, and I wasn't clear if he was saying that the police officers were fearful or the citizens were fearful. I just wanted to get clarification on what his point was on that.
It seemed to me, Renee, that he was talking about the police officers being fearful and that was a problem because if police officers approached the community as if they were dangerous, it was more likely to result in use of excessive force. That's what I heard.
Okay. Thank you.
Carmela?
Hi there. I know the safe cam was mentioned, and I think it'd be a good idea for maybe the mayor or the chief to talk about that program. And the speaker, I believe, hold on one sec, I wrote it down, just mentioned that the program they didn't feel was working properly. Could, just for the task forces, knowledge and people that are watching, you know, what is.
Nope, she muted herself.
Carmela, you're on mute. Mayor or Chief, do either of you want to share some about that program?
Sure. The SafeCam program was an online registry tool that years ago was implemented for homeowners or business owners that had their own private or commercial surveillance cameras that they could register the location. That could be useful as a tool for us when we do follow-up investigations to understand who might have video of an area. And it was not, I don't know, it was not well enrolled. I guess the enrollment was very limited. But as far as a particular comment, I'll have to look to see what the language was about. The speaker had said there was language that the person couldn't release their own video, which I'm not sure what the thought process was behind that statement. So I'm going to look that up to see what that referred to in the beginning. But again, it was just basically like a sign up. People could register the location of their cameras. That would assist our detectives when they do a canvas so they know already that there might be cameras. We're still going to canvas the area anyway to make sure there's not any new cameras or cameras that might not be registered. But that was the reason behind the start of that program several years ago. I'm not even sure how long ago.
Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Yes, thanks. So the follow-up from the chief. So the reason that we had asked in the language not to share it with the media was because many times there's something on that video when a crime occurs that if it gets out to the media and they play it, then your case is kind of shot. You know what I mean? So it was for that reason that we didn't want them to release it to the media without speaking to us first, because if there was something that was particularly, only known to the person that committed the crime, and now you plastered all over, the Capital District on 3 stations, well, there goes your leverage for trying to find the bad guy. So that was the reasoning behind that.
Thank you. I think we lost the council president. I'm sure she'll be back with us. Are there other reflections from the public comment this evening? Kevin?
So again, we heard consistently, not everyone, but most folks talking about the need to build trust through the acknowledgement of systemic racism. There was this evening, again, more challenging of our process, representation on this committee, as well as access, as well as timing. And there were earlier questions about recommendations being non-binding. The other interesting thing was, and I'm sure we'll hear from Chief on Wednesday about detention. What's possible with detention, whether stepping on someone's back is allowable or not. So yeah, again, there are themes from meeting to meeting around trust and around trust and acknowledgement of systemic racism and process. I also heard tonight concern about the process being triggering for many people, particularly folks who are really upset about the process with Edson Evidence death.
Thank you, Kevin. Laura?
I think we heard several times about frustration of being able to comment on the forum and how little time was allowed for this process. And I know we have a deadline with regard to the governor's order. And I know, Mayor, you mention it in your opening comments every time that this is a continuing process, but I think it's going to help people if we could set some kind of schedule beyond this, this is going to be a continuing process for additional comment and different ways to be heard, because I think we heard that several times. So, and of course, another thing we keep hearing is people are disappointed with the makeup of the committee and that there are so few people of color on the committee. I don't know, I'm one of the white faces on the committee, and I agreed to be on this committee because I wanted to listen, and as we said at the beginning, leaning into discomfort and really listening to what the concerns of the committee or the community are. I think everyone here is doing that. I know I am, but I don't know. I just wanted to make that comment. Thanks.
Chris, sorry.
Thank you, Tamara. I heard a new, I don't know if I'd call it a theme tonight, but there were at least two, maybe three speakers who made a plea for thinking big. I think DeQuetta talked about be the catalyst for change, and Amy Halloran talked about dream bigger. You know, and I hadn't heard that as a theme before, and I thought, you know, even though it was just two people, they were both, you know, along the same lines and almost inspirational in their desire to help us be a catalyst for change.
Thank you, Chris. Justin, and then we'll go to Renee.
I know that Renee raised her hand first, so I'll let her go first, and then, oh, she's telling me to go.
She's telling you to go.
Okay. So I was just wondering, like, there were a few questions raised in terms of, why this process is beginning so late and the makeup of the committee, things of that nature. And I was just wondering if there will be comments on that, because I think that, again, talking about transparency and trust, I know that the mayor mentioned how the board was made up earlier on another meeting. But I'm not sure if there was mention as to, why not other Black and Brown leaders in the community. So he may have, but I'm not calling it to my memory at this moment. And then also there were a few people who questioned about the process starting so late. So I was just wondering if there were going to be comments made or towards those concerns. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Justin. Renee?
I was just looking over my notes and along with what I believe it was Kevin, said about the trust issue. One of the things that also came to the forefront was the mention of the police, the police union, and the power and authority that it has. And it would be helpful, I think, for me to have a better understanding of why the union has such authority to do what it has been doing, and demanding or having seats on things like the police objective review board, and they're adamantly defending officers that have clearly done things inappropriately. My understanding of unions are there to protect the employees when they are when they are treated unfairly or things are not on the up and up. But it sounds like, based on the comments and history, that sometimes the union goes above and beyond, and just need to get a better understanding of why that's allowed.
Okay, thank you, Renee. DA Donnelly?
I just wanted to share some perspective on this. I'm a white woman who has worked in the criminal justice field for 20 plus years, and I've always worked in the public sector. And I have encountered throughout my career, as many of you know, the daughter of a police officer, married to a retired police officer, I've encountered so many times people who feel like they're on the outside looking into the criminal justice system. People who just have an inherent distrust of those of us who have jobs such as attorneys, judges, elected officials, that truly believe, based upon their life experience, that there's an inside job going on. And that is a really hard thing for those of us who are the middle management white people doing the job, because we don't see it that way. So I feel like the whole theme of this has been trust. And there is a lack of trust. And I don't think it's unique to Troy. I think it's, this last summer has demonstrated it's a national issue, perhaps even greater than that. And I think that's the most difficult part of our task. And I hope I'm not being too esoteric here, but I'm hearing people, what I've heard throughout my career is, they think you are there because you're against them, or people think that those who work in the criminal justice system have an agenda. And that's with good reason. Just like I think I don't have an agenda, others think I do because of the experiences they've had. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge what we keep hearing about the makeup of this committee. I think the mayor very, very succinctly explained why we're all sitting on this committee, who's here and who's not. But I think that we need to do something at this point. As we said, this is a continuing conversation, not going to end on March 1st. I think we need to find ways to reach out and to embrace that outreach that the community is asking for, and to think hard about the the folks who don't speak English and the folks who can't hear what we're saying here. I mean, these are things that are really valid. And we talked a little bit about low-hanging fruit in the last meeting. And these are the types of things we can do just to show trust. And I guess the point of what I'm saying is, let's not underestimate the lack of trust that people have in the criminal justice system and that people have in general white folk who are doing these jobs, because they have a perspective that we don't have. So I hope that I'm making sense as I'm trying to explain this, but I really think that we have to see what each of us can do, however small, to try to put forth something that's going to bring some trust into this whole system, because without that, none of this is going to work. So I hope that we can talk more about that. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, DA Donnelly. Starlita and then Renee.
DA Donnelly, like, I totally understand what you're saying. But on the other side of that is just like, there's laws that have been written against Black and brown people. And our Constitution, every law that has been made has been on in the theory of Black people are 2/3 of a person, you know? And when we have that thinking, everything that we do, everything that we, live by is done in whiteness. And we have to acknowledge those things and do better. And it's those Rockefeller laws and adding a substance to cocaine, someone's getting life sentences over, and it's just like acknowledging that. And I've met you. I think you are a fair DA from what I've seen. But it's going a step further and seeing color when we are giving out sentences, and not just saying we don't see color. We have to see color. And what are we going to give the white man for selling crack cocaine against the Black man selling crack cocaine? And we know that these laws have been unjust for so long. And yes, it's rooted in our DNA that we know once we get in front of the court system, like, it's not going to turn out the way that we think it's going to turn out, or the way our white neighbor situation turned out. From traffic stops, my husband has gotten pulled over and for a taillight being out and actually get stepped out the car. That's not okay. Why is my car being cleared out? Our car being cleared out for a taillight being broken. But it's ingrained in everything. And it's like when DeQuetta and Steve speaks of being a catalyst, or the hope, it's just like, we have what it takes to be the catalyst in Troy, New York. But every single last one of us has to know what we have to dig deep. And it's going to take some time, and it's going to, there's going to be some sweat, blood, and tears here, but we have to dig deep. And I know, and I believe in the city that I grew up in and loved, born and raised here. And I want to be the catalyst and be a part of this major change that needs to come to Troy, New York. But please believe that it's in our laws, it's in our housing, it's in our school districts, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Thank you, Starlita. We're going to go back over to James Wilde, who was one of the public commenters. He was using someone else's computer, so we couldn't find him. So we're going to give him 3 minutes, and then we're going to come back and summarize next steps for the committee.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly make my comments. I just wanted, before I do, I was on the meeting when my name was called, so just wanted to speak for the other individuals that potentially were able to speak at the time when they were called. So just hopefully that they'll get an opportunity as well. But as far as my comments for the PRRC, I think it's just a really sad missed opportunity that the city of Troy and the Troy Police Department is missing out on here after the governor had announced the policing reform initiative back in June. I know some of the people had mentioned that this was all happening in haste, and I agree with that it has been happening in haste. However, I would also say that it seems like the committee is coasting right into the April 1st deadline for submitting their report with these last minute sessions for public commentary. I also wanted to just voice my opinion about the composition of the committee and voice my displeasure that the committee is comprised of 2 members who do not believe and have stated publicly that there is systematic racism in the Troy Police Department. So that is very unfortunate. Additionally, as Justin mentioned, I think it needs to be restated over and over about how this committee was selected and to justify the lack of diversity within it. And I also think that how the members of the committee will not be able to make unbiased decisions or be objective when it comes to determining what policing policies should be enacted.
James, you have about 10 seconds.
Sure, and I'll just wrap up by saying that it's unfortunate that the composition of the committee has such ties to the city of Troy and law enforcement as it is, and it should be comprised more of concerned citizens such as myself and the others who have spoken this evening.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
We're glad we were able to bring you in. Mayor.
There are a number of things I'd like to comment on, but I don't want to keep everybody late. I know we'll be having more sessions. So I'll touch on them, but I think the DA hit the nail on the head from where I sit anyway. Everything that we've spoken of, whether it be racial bias, whether it be transparency, whether it be community policing, whether it be developing relationships between individual police officers and community members, everything that we've spoken of is related to trust. Trust is absolutely essential in policing. Trust is absolutely essential in government. The social compact works when people trust. When they don't trust, we have breakdowns, and we've witnessed that on the national level recently. So I think everything that we talk about needs to have a sense of, does this build trust? Does this enhance trust between police and the community? Without that trust, there's nothing we can really do to reinvent or reimagine or reform police. We have to have an eye on trust at all times. There have been some concerns raised about the process. This evening, I chose not to include all the comments I usually do. The process is just beginning. This is just the kickoff. And it was intended, well, let me back up a step. One of the problems I've had with the way the governor laid this out is addressing policing in isolation of everything else. So we're addressing policing, but we're not talking about diversion programs. We're not talking about mental health issues. We're not talking about housing. We're not talking about domestic violence. Not talking about job insecurity, healthcare, wealth gaps. Those are all things that lead to or are predeterminants often of people running into the criminal justice system. I'd like to think big. I'd like to be a change driver. That's a process. And even if you look at the suggestions that have come out from other communities who have submitted their draft reports or final reports, they're relatively small items. I'd like Troy to be bigger than that, but we get bigger by taking small bites, by starting off bringing in the people who have the say, who pull the levers in the agencies or departments that are going to help us create the big change. So yes, there will be, this is the beginning. There will continue to be work. There will be committees that will be made up of other people who are interested in particular areas, who want to come in and put on the table big change. And we can sit down together. We have the experts at the table. We can talk about what that would look like, how that would be resourced, and how it would ripple through the system. Nobody's going to have that done by April 1st. You know, it's foolhardy to believe that that's even possible. And that's one of the problems I had with the design of this program from the get-go. So I have often spoke of it being the beginning of a process. This is the beginning of the process. It does not include representatives of every group in the community. Every group in the community has been invited to speak to us. As we flesh out next moves, as we flesh out ideas that we might want to run with, there will be new people brought in who have passion or expertise in that area and can help us dream bigger and can help us take this to a new level, can help Troy become a role model for other communities to follow. That's not going to happen by April 1st in any community. So again, this is in a football analogy, this is the kickoff. This is the beginning of the game. And I hope that you will keep that in mind. This committee, or this work doesn't end on April 1st. There was talk about, there were questions about the PBA. That's an issue of collective bargaining law on a federal and state level. It presents challenges. It also presents opportunities. You know, we could spend a whole night on that. I'm not going to talk about that, but they're not evil people. They represent the collective interests of their groups. We need to work with the unions, and we have tried very hard to make that a productive relationship. Does it take additional time? Yes, absolutely does. That dialogue always does. So again, I don't have a magic wand. I can't change everything overnight. Nobody on this panel can. This is the beginning of a dialogue, and we'll take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm looking at the time where we are. It's a little bit after 8. I don't want to shut down discussion if anyone has anything else that they want to add this evening. If not,
Cameron?
Yep.
Sorry, just there, one thing that did come through, and and it was as we were just talking, as we're looking at, we talked last time about the buckets, like trying to kind of formulate and kind of start carving out where we can put things that we're hearing. One of the other things that comes through is, you know, is how do we measure this, right? How do we measure success or where we're going or how we're doing? And I think somebody had actually talked about that. So one of the things I would encourage us to do as we leave tonight and we get ready to hear on Wednesday and listen on Wednesday is thinking about metrics and how we put some metrics to some of these things. It's going to be difficult because some of them are not tangible and there's not a way to tally it. So, but you know, a good plan involves metrics to base its success on. So I think we need to start thinking about that as well too, because having just a plan that's very theoretical is not what is being asked of us. So I think that we need to start thinking a little bit about that as well too.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anyone else before we do a quick summary and then look at our next steps? Okay, John, would you pull up the slide that shows kind of what's upcoming? So we looked at some of the themes at our last committee meeting. Tonight we heard, some concerns around this becoming a continuing process, some questions about how the union works, thinking big, dreaming big, and then again, this idea of systemic racism, and then the critical nature of building trust as we move forward. So those themes, what we're going to do is take the themes that we talked about tonight, and then also at our last committee meeting, we're going to start to pull those together, and we'll look at them when we're together again on Wednesday. But this is kind of our schedule going forward. The gray, the darker gray shows the activities that we've already had. We've had a number of affinity group meetings. We've had our 3 public forums. Coming up on Wednesday, we have the Boys and Girls Club, both from Troy and Lansingburg, will be coming and sharing their perspective as an affinity group. And then Chief Owens will also be doing a presentation around how the Troy Police Department is working today and some of his perspectives. And then we will have a committee debrief. And then the community has time to continue to send in emails or postal mail comments to the committee through March 1st. And then we will get together again on March 1st to really look at all of the feedback that has come in from all of the different mechanisms and start to look at developing some more meat around the plan. By early to mid-March, the idea is to have the plan out for another public comment period. So for about a week, and then there would be some revisions and then moving to the city council ratifying the plan. So that's kind of our steps looking ahead. So does anyone have any questions before or any final thoughts before we end this evening? Okay, so again, I think we'd like to thank everyone who came to all of the different public forums. Thank you for your feedback. And again, if the discussion here in the committee debrief brought up any additional ideas or thoughts, please connect with the committee through email or postal mail. So we will come back together on Wednesday night to hear from the Boys and Girls Club and from Chief Owens and to continue our work. All right, everyone have a good night.
Night, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, Tamara.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.